It was in 2258 that a woman named Catherine gave birth at the Jefferson Memorial in the Capital Wasteland. Sadly, Catherine would pass away shortly after the child's birth. But what no one knew at the time was that this child would go on to profoundly impact countless lives, present and future, as well as forever change the wasteland. They were the lone wanderer. But what if tragedy struck and the child had died alongside their mother? What if the lone wanderer never grew up to change the wasteland? Let's talk about it. Here's what I think would happen if the lone wanderer died. So, a bit of necessary background. James and Catherine were husband and wife, working on their magnum opus, a massive water purification project located at the Jefferson Memorial that would aim to bring clean drinking water to the entire wasteland. Before the Lone Wanderer's birth in 2258, Project Purity was being worked on by not only James and Catherine, but a handful of other scientists, including Dr. Madison Lee. James had also managed to successfully negotiate with the newly promoted Brotherhood of Steel leader, Owen Lyons, to get the Brotherhood to set up a garrison at the memorial and offer their protective services. This was all before the events of Fallout 3. However, problems with the project started to pop up. Increased super mutant attacks, problems with scaling up the purification output, and Catherine's pregnancy slowly grinded the project to a halt. Catherine's death was the straw that broke the camel's back. Project Purity would be halted indefinitely. Everyone working on the project would go their separate ways, focusing on other things to take their minds off of their failed project. And so, this brings us to the first subject of our little hypothetical: James. Before the events of Fallout 3, the Lone Wanderer's father, James, alongside the baby Lone Wanderer, were escorted by Star Paladin Cross to Vault 101. James used his medical background to gain entry to the isolated vault, promising his services in exchange for shelter. He had hoped that by raising his child in the safety of a vault, they would be protected from the hazards of the outside world. However, as the Lone Wanderer had died in this hypothetical, James would have no real reason to seek refuge in the vault. His decision to go there in the first place wasn't one born out of fear or his own safety, but out of love, a desperate desire to protect his child from the dangers of the Capital Wasteland. Without that motivation, his path would change entirely. The loss of both Catherine and their child would leave James shattered. It's unlikely he'd return to Project Purity immediately, bringing the project to a halt, similar to the actual events of the game. The dream he shared with Catherine, that of bringing clean and accessible water to the wasteland, would feel hollow without her. A grieving James would likely abandon the Jefferson Memorial altogether, leaving the scientists and Brotherhood of Steel members that helped with it to go their own ways. Again, this isn't too dissimilar from the actual events of Fallout 3. I think James, just like Madison Lee in the actual game, would find himself living in Rivet City. Both he and Lee would join up with its scientific community. There, he would have a chance to heal through his grief alongside some familiar faces. He might never fully recover from losing Catherine and their child, but in Rivet City's lab, he would at least find purpose again. Over time, I think James would find his footing once again. Thoughts of Project Purity would return. Just like in the actual events of Fallout 3, James would see the continuation of Project Purity as a way to honor his late wife and child. Catherine's vision, their shared dream of clean, abundant water for the wasteland, would start to feel like the one thing that could give her death meaning. Rivet City's lab offered him a chance to test new ideas and refine old ones, laying the groundwork for a potential second attempt at the Jefferson Memorial Project. Reinvigorated, James would set out to restart Project Purity, but the problems would still persist. In the original timeline, James discovered all the stuff about Stanislaus Braun, the Gek, and Vault 112 through reading restricted terminals in Vault 101. In this timeline, though, James never went to Vault 101, leaving him at a dead end. But James is a bright guy. Rather than going to Vault 101, I'd imagine that he'd be able to put together some clues from scavengers, other scientists, or even the Brotherhood of Steel to point him in the right direction. One way or another, James would find himself on the path towards seeking out Vault 112 and the Gek. He didn't need the Lone Wanderer to find it in the original timeline. I don't think he'd need them in this one. And so, just like in the actual events of Fallout 3, his journey would take him to Smith Casey's garage, to Vault 112, to Stanislaus Braun. James would enter Vault 112 alone. Unbeknownst to him, his fate would be sealed the moment he stepped into Stanislaus Braun's twisted simulation. Unlike the events of Fallout 3, there would be no Lone Wanderer to come searching for him, no determined child to follow his steps and pull him out of Braun's nightmarish world. James's journey would end here, forever trapped in Braun's made-up simulation. Project Purity would remain unfinished, and the dream of clean water for the wasteland would wither in his absence. Rivet City might mourn his loss after noticing that he hadn't returned in a while, but the wasteland itself would scarcely care. Just another tragic fate. Though not all would be doomed for the Capital Wasteland. Without the Lone Wanderer to set events into motion, Dr. Madison Lee's path would take a vastly different course. Without being drawn back into Project Purity like in the actual game, Lee could focus entirely on the work she had begun at Rivet City. For years following Catherine's death, she had labored in Rivet City, trying to solve some of the wasteland's most pressing problems. How to get food to grow that wasn't irradiated, how to harness sustainable power, and notably, how to give the people of the Capital Wasteland a fighting chance. While her work may not have been as world-changing as Project Purity is, she was taking the early steps to bettering the Capital Wasteland, even if it were at a smaller scale. Without going back to Project Purity, these ambitions might finally bear fruit. Literally. Lee's work on hydroponics could revolutionize the way the wasteland approaches agriculture. By refining methods to grow crops in controlled, radiation-free environments, she might create the foundation for reliable, healthy food production. With time and resources, Rivet City could become a hub for this new technology, exporting knowledge and supplies to other settlements. Rather than the Jefferson Memorial exporting clean water, it's Rivet City exporting clean pears. It wouldn't solve every problem, like clean water would be better, but it would be a start. While the loss of Project Purity as a potential clean water source would remain as a significant hurdle, Lee's work might help mitigate the damage. Clean food could make life in the Capital Wasteland more bearable, giving people the means to live longer and healthier lives. Over time, these advances could form the foundation of a new wasteland. But her not going back to Project Purity means that she wouldn't end up fleeing to the Brotherhood of Steel, escorted by the Lone Wanderer. This also means that she wouldn't spend time sheltered at the Citadel, which means that she wouldn't have had the opportunity to solve Liberty Prime's power problems. You see, the Brotherhood of Steel struggled for years to find ways of activating the big death robot they found underneath the Citadel. But with the help of Dr. Madison Lee's research into portable fusion power, Liberty Prime was brought online for the first time in history. Without Lee going to the Citadel, that would never happen. Rather, her work would keep her in Rivet City. In this hypothetical timeline, Madison Lee would remain as one of the Wasteland's unsung heroes. Her contributions wouldn't carry the same dramatic weight as activating the Purifier or Liberty Prime, but they would ripple through the lives of countless people. While implementing her work would start small, replicating it in other settlements would follow shortly after. It would be Lee's influence and research that would lead to hydroponic gardens and clean food in every peaceful settlement. Perhaps in some ways, this quieter, more methodical approach would bring a kind of hope that the wasteland so desperately needs, similar to the hope that Project Purity provides in the actual game. As a side note, she also probably wouldn't be poached by the Institute in Fallout 4, but the outcomes from that might be better saved for a future video. But the Capital Wasteland wouldn't be without conflict. While James would meet a tragic end in his pursuit of clean water, and Dr. Lee would find some acclaim with her clean food, the Enclave and Brotherhood would still find a way to clash in a bloody battle. Project Purity would still be far too tempting of a prize to be ignored. The promise of clean, abundant water held strategic value beyond its humanitarian appeal. For the Enclave, it represented a way to assert dominance over the wasteland. For the Brotherhood, it would be a piece of technology that they could not allow their enemies to control. Just like in Fallout 3, the Enclave would reveal themselves to the Capital Wasteland at some point in time. Without James's and the Lone Wanderer's heroics at the Purifier, the Enclave would be inheriting the unfinished Project Purity without any resistance whatsoever. Colonel Autumn, one half of the Enclave leadership, would likely push for the Purifier's activation as a show of power, a way to legitimize the Enclave's claim as the rightful rulers of post-war America. The Enclave would still need to find somewhere that they could acquire a GEC and get their scientists working overtime to get the project in working order, but I'm sure it could be done. But before they could make any progress though, I'd imagine that their rivals would take some interest in what the Enclave was doing. On the flip side, the Brotherhood of Steel would not sit idly by. While they may have abandoned the project after Catherine's death, like everyone else, the Brotherhood of Steel would still be interested in gaining control of the Jefferson Memorial. Although Elder Lyon's chapter had already abandoned much of the traditional Brotherhood doctrines, choosing instead to focus on protecting the people of the wasteland, taking over Project Purity would be beneficial twofold. They could attempt to bring clean drinking water to the Capital Wasteland, while also securing a cutting-edge piece of technology on behalf of the Brotherhood. Allowing the Enclave to control Project Purity would be a surefire way to sign the death warrant for both Lyon's Brotherhood of Steel and perhaps the Capital Wasteland as a whole. The Brotherhood's forces would muster for an all-out assault. And thus, just like in the actual events of Fallout 3, the Brotherhood-Enclave War would commence. But this time round, the resulting conflict would be doubly devastating. You see, in the actual events of Fallout 3, the Brotherhood has two notable game changers when it comes to their battle. One, they have the Lone Wanderer acting as a shock troop alongside Lyon's Pride. As the Lone Wanderer is dead in this hypothetical, they wouldn't have that Rambo-like figure anymore. And two, they have Liberty Prime. In this hypothetical, Dr. Madison Lee wouldn't find herself at the Citadel to help solve Liberty Prime's power problem. Discovering a way to power up Liberty Prime would continue to befuddle Brotherhood scribes, and the giant death machine would continue to gather dust. Without both of these cheat codes, the Brotherhood would face an uphill battle. Maybe it'd even be a 90-degree hill, like an impossible one to climb. However, I do think that the Brotherhood's resilience shouldn't be underestimated. Even without Liberty Prime and the Lone Wanderer, they would fight tooth and nail to prevent the Enclave from cementing their control. The Capital Wasteland would turn into a war zone, with its inhabitants caught in the crossfire of two titanic forces, with neither one being particularly appealing. Both want control of what could be the single strongest piece of technology the Wasteland has ever seen. Could either faction be trusted to utilize it well? I don't know. Settlements like Megaton and Rivet City might struggle to maintain neutrality, leaning more towards the Steel's side, while scavengers and mercenaries like Talon Company would find opportunities in the chaos. The Brotherhood-Enclave War would plague the region for quite a while, I'd imagine. And while I do think that the Enclave would have the upper hand, being more mobilized with their vertibirds, having a secret underground base, and playing on the defensive side when it comes to the Memorial, there is one thing that could topple the Enclave, giving way to a Brotherhood victory. And that's internal politics. The Enclave and Fallout 3 have a really janky power structure. After receiving word from a President John Henry Eden, Colonel Autumn's father led Enclave remnants westwards from California to the Raven Rock facility. Eden and Raven Rock offered abundant resources, advanced robotics, and a secure position to rebuild from. But Eden's vision for the Enclave came with a darker side: his genocidal plans for the Wasteland. When Colonel Autumn took over after his father's death, the cracks in the Enclave's unity started to show. Unlike his father, who had respected Eden's authority as president, Autumn was far more independent. He saw Eden's rigid ideology as a liability, particularly the plan to distribute modified FEV through Project Purity's water supply. In Autumn's eyes, annihilating the Wasteland's population was unnecessary and short-sighted. Why wipe out potential allies and subjects when you could control them with the promise of clean water? In the game, this conflict between the two leaders is touched on briefly, notably when Eden recruits the Lone Wanderer to sabotage Project Purity with the modified FEV. I think in the hypothetical world where the Lone Wanderer dies, this fundamental disagreement would set the stage for a bitter power struggle within the Enclave. Autumn commands the loyalty of the human Enclave members who trusted his practical approach and leadership in battle. Eden, however, had absolute control over Raven Rock's infrastructure, robotic army, and propaganda systems. The two leaders' goals couldn't coexist. One sought to rule, while the other sought to cleanse. Without the Lone Wanderer to tip the scales, this power struggle would likely escalate unchecked. As the Brotherhood fought to wrest control of the Purifier from the Enclave, the infighting between Autumn's loyalists and Eden's purists could weaken their own defenses. Autumn might attempt to stage a coup against Eden, forcing the AI to take drastic measures to maintain control. Alternatively, Eden's unwavering belief in his genocidal plans could lead him to activate the modified FEV prematurely, undermining Autumn's authority and alienating even his most loyal followers. The internal chaos could give the Brotherhood of Steel the opening they needed. While the Enclave battled itself, the Brotherhood would strike, seizing Project Purity and pushing the Enclave back. Elder Lion's forces would have the advantage of unity. Unlike the Enclave, the Brotherhood's focus on defending humanity would allow them to capitalize on their enemies' disarray. Ultimately, the Enclave's inability to resolve the tension between Eden and Autumn could be their undoing. While I believe that their advanced technology and strategic position gave them the upper hand initially, their internal divisions would leave them vulnerable, paving the way for a Brotherhood victory. It would be the Brotherhood of Steel who would secure the unfinished Project Purity. The Capital Wasteland, already scarred by a gruesome war, would be witness to yet another faction torn apart by its own ambition. And even if the Enclave wasn't entirely wiped out, Raven Rock's systems would be hostile to anyone who sided with Autumn. Scattered and disorganized, the Enclave would once again have to go into hiding, moving on to a new wasteland, biding their time and power before trying their hostile takeover once again. History repeats itself, you know? With the Enclave defeated and Project Purity in the hands of the Brotherhood of Steel, you might be thinking, hey, so is the game the exact same thing if the Lone Wanderer dies? And while it might seem that way, I think a third faction I've yet to mention would actually find the most success in a world without the Lone Wanderer, and that's the Super Mutants. The Super Mutants of the Capital Wasteland, left to their own devices, would emerge stronger than ever. Without the Lone Wanderer disrupting their operations and uncovering their mutant-making methods in Vault 87, the mutants would face far less resistance. And with the Brotherhood of Steel preoccupied with the Enclave, their raids on human settlements wouldn't just continue, they'd intensify. With fewer Brotherhood patrols to stop them, the mutants would expand their reach, capturing more people to drag back to Vault 87 for the cruel experiments that fuel their numbers. Sure, by the start of the game, they may be running out of FEV in Vault 87, as evident by a bit of idle dialogue, but as they face less resistance, it's possible that they could expand outwards and find more in some derelict pre-war base. The point is that the super mutants of the Capital Wasteland would certainly be in the best position to better their livelihood. The Brotherhood of Steel, battered from their war with the Enclave, would struggle to keep up. Their casualties from the war would leave gaping holes in their ranks, forcing them to consolidate their forces and prioritize defending key positions like the Citadel and Project Purity. This shift in focus would leave their other outposts, like the GNR Plaza, Washington Monument, and Arlington Library, vulnerable. It's likely that Galaxy News Radio, along with Three Dog, would go off air indefinitely. But that wouldn't be all. Already in Fallout 3, we see Big Town be attacked by super mutants, but with their increased reach and presence, it's likely that other human settlements like Little Lamplight, Arfu, and Evergreen Mills would find themselves also facing a super mutant onslaught. What's more is that it's likely that the super mutants across the entire Capital Wasteland would unite. It's in Fallout 4 that a terminal states that Arthur Maxson defeated a super mutant warlord named Shepard. Shepard was trying to bring all the super mutant clans together, but perhaps in this timeline, Maxson wouldn't get the opportunity to slay the mutant warlord because the Brotherhood's presence shrank in the aftermath of the Enclave Brotherhood of Steel war, rather than grew like in the actual game. With Shepard at the helm and all the super mutants working towards a common goal, they might become nigh unstoppable, an inevitable chaotic force that would bring the Capital Wasteland to its knees. In a way, the super mutants might end up as the unintended winners of the Lone Wanderer's absence. The Brotherhood and Enclave would weaken each other in their war, leaving mutants with little opposition. Their dominance would mark a grim new chapter in the Capital Wasteland, one where humanity's survival grows bleaker by the day. Without a Lone Wanderer to push back the tide, the Wasteland's best hope might just be holding on for dear life. And that's what I think would happen if the Lone Wanderer had died. I know we didn't cover every facet of how the Wasteland and its people would change without the Lone Wanderer. There are, for sure, countless other stories, characters, and events that could have unfolded differently. What might have become of Megaton? Would Rivet City remain a beacon of civilization, or falter under increasing mutant and raider threats? The possibilities are endless, and that's part of what makes imagining these what-if scenarios so fun. What do you think would happen to the Capital Wasteland without the Lone Wanderer? Would it be better off in some ways, or would chaos and despair overtake the region entirely? Let me know what you think. But that's all from me today, folks. If you liked the video, be sure to share and subscribe, join the Discord. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
The world has lost one of its few remaining visionaries.